Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salam, hello, peace to you all, and welcome to Office Hours 19, our regular live stream program. It's great. It's my favorite part of the week at the end of regular work, a chance to throw open the door and have the Radical Academy, open. And it's great to have all of you coming in. Please do like the stream, subscribe to the channel. If you're watching on X, you can retweet it. You can also share it. If you're watching on YouTube, on your various social media accounts and platforms. And if you want to be part of the discussion, which is, of course, something you do want to do because there's so many great commenters and opportunities to raise questions and to react to other people's comments in this lively, wonderful commentariat community in the chat, then come over to the YouTube channel. And, last week, you all had to suffer an interminable solo office hour mega monologue. We're so lucky this week. We're back to normal service. And we have a wonderful returning guest, a veteran of office hours as well as struggle sessions, radical anti-imperialist psychologist, friend of the show, Benji Schoendorff. Welcome. It's great to see you.
Oh, thank you very much, Adnan, for having me back. I keep on thinking that people won't have me back, but that's just my personal history getting in the way. So, yeah.
You're on YouTube, and so that's always a danger, apparently. Like the channel has still, Resistance is Fertile. We should mention that you are host of Resistance is Fertile, and people can check out all the wonderful work that you're doing on Substack, and also you live stream on X, and actually, both of those seem to be functioning, so you can watch on those platforms. But you're not on YouTube. Resistance is Fertile is still...
I'm not on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm one of those China glazers, and I actually asked my friend, Comrade Xi, to tell Keir Starmer to tell YouTube to have me back, because I suspect he's the guy, my old roommate, who got me banned to begin with. So
he told Paul Mason, go take care of this. If people don't know, of course you do, because many of you probably watch The Gray Zone, and you know that there's a fake leftist, Paul Mason, a journalist for The Guardian, who also tried to run as he tried to be a politician too. He tried to run in the Labour Party for Parliament in the UK, and that didn't work out too well, because these people are remarkably unpopular. They have to have a huge amount of money and corporate interests backing them, but so clearly that might have been a problem. I
went to, I actually I said that in my view, Paul Mason was a new version of the Psy operative that Eric Blair, also known as George Orwell, was.
Yes.
And then all this bunch of English chauvinists jumped on my case, including a guy who was at Oxford with me 40 years ago, and finally opened that I was still the same silly radical phrasemonger as I was then, which I took as a badge of honor. Because,
absolutely. I love a consistency.
Exactly.
Why should we be growing up when the world has not grown up? It's like, well, if you want me to move on, well, then solve the problem so I can live my life, but unfortunately we're still, dealing, we're of an age where we remember that we were supposedly promised Cold War peace dividend when the, we were supposed to get all of these wonderful things, and instead we got globalization, which was just, corporate capitalist neoliberalism, and devastation of the planet and more wars and all of that. But we were supposed to get this peace dividend, and we never got it.
And speaking of silly phrasemongers, it is true that the ruling classes have become so much wiser and, so much less silly. It's not as if there were a bunch of narcissistic clowns who can barely string two sentences together and just all a bunch of actors, actually, that were some grown in a lab somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have to say, this is something I've noticed since, actually, I was thinking about this and thinking about you the other day because we spent time in the UK. And I was thinking about ever since John Major, okay,
Oh,
became
God.
prime minister after Thatcher and led the Conservative Party in government, for a period before the Blair Third Way revolution, absolutely collapsed politics in the West. And we've all been saddled with, an you know there always were these imperial continuities from administration to administration, particularly when it came to foreign policy and international affairs as part of the empire. But there were some meaningful differences between those who supported a welfare state and those who wanted to dismantle it. But then the left, so-called left wing of the Labor Party, was destroyed. Its connections with labor unions and workers abandoned, and they went this sort of third way into neoliberalism. But ever since John Major, I thought the entire elite is incredibly mediocre. Like John Major, like how did he become prime minister of the UK? Not because they have this populist open, anybody can rise up. He came from, like a really humble, kind of background, never had a serious education. And in some ways, you might say, oh, well, that's great because it wasn't just this Oxbridge elite. But yet, at another level, that meant that he was just prisoner to corporate backers and money and had no real intellectual resources, to offer anything to people.
I think you're selling him short because he was a fairly competent chartered accountant, as far as I remember.
Okay, yeah, that's true. In business, yeah, he did, yeah. But at any rate, I mean, we have a lot to talk about. So before, I want to just tell people that this is also a fundraiser for the Samir Project's Ramadan Iftar campaign. And if you don't know the Samir Project, you should go check them out. In addition to hopefully supporting this campaign, they are a Palestinian-led mutual aid group that operates in Gaza, particularly northern Gaza, and try and offer kind of collect. There are many appeals, there are many individual appeals. But one thing that I really appreciate about the Samir Project is that they're trying to organize collective support for Palestinians to keep them on their land with infrastructure projects, mutual aid, food support, many other things. But the month of Ramadan is coming up, which is very important for Muslims as one of the kind of key parts of the year, the practice of fasting. And, these are people who have been starved and are starving. I've noticed the last two Ramadans during the severe genocide, nonetheless, people have continued to adhere to this practice of fasting because it is so important to them spiritually, religiously. It gives them a sense of community and commitment together. This is meant to be something that all Muslims do to remind themselves of to be empathetic for those who may be suffering and to do something about it. But these are people who are being starved actively during this genocide. So it's just really amazing that they're doing this. Can we do something to help these people, support them so that they have something to break their fast with at night? Please join this campaign. I put up a link at the very top of the comments, but I'm going to post it again right now, and I'll try and do that periodically as well so that you can go in and make a donation. What I'd like to do. And I think this is really a very modest goal. I didn't want to set high, things. I hope we do much better than what I've, set out as a target. But if we could get at least 10 people from office hours during the live stream to make a donation of $24, which is 3 meals at $8 a meal. That would be something. I hope we can do much more, but we'll be doing this every week, okay, from now and through the month of Ramadan. But it's important to try and do as much now because they need these resources to purchase food, to make arrangements before the month of Ramadan starts later in February. So I just want to encourage you right now, before I started the stream, I don't know, for some reason it's in British pounds, and I don't know how to change that setting on the page, but it was at 19,142 pounds, and hopefully that will go up. If you do manage to make a donation, please do post in the chat that you've done so and encourage others to follow your example in being generous if you can. This is something I just would like to do weekly. So thank you so much for your support. Let's see what we can do.
So just to say, Adnan, so absolutely do donate. I'm always quoting Justin Porter, who came up with the phrase, give until it hurts. Yeah. Don't, of course, put your family outside, especially not here where it's about -20 or something Celsius. But do give until it hurts. If you want to change the currency, by the way, you can easily do that. At the top right, where is the currency, you can actually click on that and go, I'm going to go in Canadian dollars myself, or you want US dollars?
Well, when you're donating, you can change the currency, yes, exactly. But the ticker that shows
gotcha.
where they are in the campaign
of course.
is in British, because I think it's a UK-based group. But give in whatever denominations you can. Just use the conversion table. They have that, for choosing to give meals. It's $8 and of course, sadly these days, until the war on Iran spikes oil prices globally and Canada starts benefiting from the tar sand exploitation that they're very eager to sell, in the Pacific with the new capacities that they're trying to build for pipelines going east-west rather than just north-south to the U.S. market. It means that that's probably about 12 or 13 Canadian dollars, because the exchange rate is very bad, because the Canadian dollar is very weak, because we are like an oil Gulf, we're like a Gulf state. In that our Canadian dollar is very closely tied to the price of oil, because Canada is the 4th largest producer and exporter of oil. And it is almost all the dirtiest, worst for the, oil for the environment, with all this toxic sludge that's produced, and a very intensive refining process that involves a huge amount of energy. And, they are...
And one that violates also indigenous rights and rail and clear demands.
That's right. I mean, absolutely. And they are using natural gas, which is, still a fossil fuel, but happens to be a little bit cleaner. They are using massive amounts of natural gas, and they built a pipeline to bring, natural gas from, further in the northeastern part of Canada to Alberta, where they can use it, to produce this oil, right? So it's just absolutely disgusting on every level. And I agree, Benji, your dog was agreeing with you.
My dog is land back all the way.
Absolutely. Okay, well, enough of all of that. It's time to get into demystifying and resisting the imperial Psywar. So Benji,
okay.
Take us through your approach on this.
Okay, so in honor of being on your office hours, I've actually bothered to take notes and to prepare something. And basically, there are
Unlike every other guest who's ever been on. So
a few sections to what I'm going. No, unlike what I normally do, which is to come totally unprepared. And one is just a general introduction, but then it's basically the introduction is you're in a Psywar, we're in a Psywar, whether you like it or not. And then, it has been theorized that we're in a Psywar by those who started it, being, the imperialists, but it's also been theorized by those who resist it. And we'll look at this later. And I went back to Sun Tzu, because now I've become, officially a China glazer, so forget Clausewitz. And Sun Tzu famously said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. What Sun Tzu hadn't totally taken into account is the state of today's, what I call white empire, US-centered imperialism. And that enemy, they know their enemy quite well, their targets quite well, but they don't know themselves so well. And as we'll see, it's kind of inevitable that they can't know themselves so well due to what they rely on. And it's also what makes them weak eventually, and what makes me very optimistic that we are going to win this war, not just the Psywar, but the overall war, which I believe is a war for life. So then I have, following our friend Sun Tzu, I have a couple of parts. One is to know ourselves. The other one is to know our enemy, of course, how they function. And finally, how we resist and win this war. So that was my general idea for our time together tonight.
Okay, really interesting. I mean, that's fascinating that it comes from kind of war strategy work of great antiquity, and yet these principles are very clearly well articulated there and useful for us to take note of in our contemporary circumstances. Why don't we, start with that first point that you raised?
Right.
Because when you say we are all in a Psywar, whether we want it or not, or whether we want to be in it or not, I mean, who wants to be in a Psywar first? Like, let's point out, why would some want to be in a Psywar?
Who wants to be in any war?
Well, exactly. But why the Psywar? I think part of this is something we should be encouraged by. I think there has always been disinformation and psychological dimensions, but in our era in particular, it's because the empire can't actually marshal all the resources necessary to just militarily dominate and defeat concerted anti-colonial, anti-imperial resistance across the world. So they had to create other techniques to do it without having the cost of what they, they spend a lot of treasure on it. So it's not that, but it's like the blood, you just don't have the men and the means, the soldiers. So what is the Psywar? And
let's look at it for a minute. And actually, Autonomous Collective said all war is hybrid, and I believe that is the case. So let's look at how to know ourselves, right? And I believe we need to go back to basic processes. So go and get yourself a cup of tea. No, I'm joking. The basic processes of human consciousness. Basically, we humans are what I would call narrative creatures. We live by narrative. We live by narrative because this emerging ability of language gave us an adaptive advantage. This is why we kept it and we made it even ever more sophisticated. Language at its basics, allows us to relate things between themselves and ourselves between one another. Language itself is a function of social relations. We learn it through relating with other people. So we learn that relating with other people through social relations, and that language then comes to condition our social relations and can have an impact on our social relations and also on our material life. And this is what is known as a dialectical relation between those two elements, mind and matter, if you will, right? And that means we live inside narratives. They're very complicated, they're dynamic. They're an activity that we do on an ongoing basis, and that allows to live inside what I would call systems of meaning. The capitalist political economy depends on narrative as much as on material conditions. In fact, any human society that uses language, being all human societies today on the planet, depend on narrative as much as on their material conditions, right? You can't have one without the other, and they both impact one another. So far, so Marxist, I would say, right? So, but those narratives, they are so prevalent that they're literally like the water we swim in. And it's very hard for fish to see the water they swim in, or even to talk in intelligible ways about the water. However, the ruling class, which is kind of fish farming us, they know exactly what to put in the narrative water so that they can continue making a profit, extracting from us what they need to extract. Those systems of meaning, those narratives are, in fact, highly complex dynamic systems. They're ongoing, and for each and every one of us, they organize around two basic poles. One has to do with me in relation to my stuff, so that's my thoughts, my feelings, my memories, my personal history, and also my actions in the world. And the second pole is me in relation to others, what I am in relation to the others who have also trained me to relate things together. Together, these two poles, my individual identity, if you like, and my collective identity, or my individual identity as part of a collective, they form what I will call systems of meanings. You can also call them narratives, but the meaning is very important. It's the thing that makes it all go together. You know, who I am to myself is a meaning of me. Who I am in relation to others is a meaning of me too in relation to others, right? And these systems, these narratives, they're both individual and collective. So as societies, as collectives, we also have collective narratives, right? They're partly conscious or narratives, whether individual or collective, and partly unconscious. And to be maintained, they need some relation, some kind of a sane relation, our friend Ali Kadri would say, to the material conditions, right? And what this tells us is it points to the centrality, to the importance of meaning. In fact, it's easy to see that importance because meaninglessness leads us to despair. And those identities, they get organized around a dialectic between I am a human like every other human, and I am at one and the same time different from other humans. And it's from this dialectic that emerges individual consciousness of me being me, but also being the same as the others, right? And those systems of meaning will differ in the way they balance the two poles of this dialectic between equal, part of common humanity, and different and somewhat outside in my differences from common humanity. Those systems of meaning, they're based on shared experience. You know, it's what Ibn Khaldun was referring to when he was talking about asabiya, which was based, originally on common experience of those nomadic tribes, but also they are based on shared experiences, which today is not going to be how we roam to the desert as a nomadic tribe, but could very well be what we do, for example, on social media, in addition to in our IRL communities. So they also include those parasocial identities, right? Meaning is so important, and life needs to have meaning. And I will even give you for free, especially, well, you need to give some donations to the Samia project, but what the meaning of life is. And the meaning of life is literally to live meaningful lives because of that centrality of meaning to being a human creature in a narrative universe, right? And it can be based on many things, mostly, spiritual faith, could be also political faith. I believe we can organize a better society, and that's enough to keep me going. They can be based on whatever people call as values, but they need to give you a general meaning to allow you to live inside a system where life makes sense in one way or another. So that was my presentation of knowing ourselves. I think it's very important to understand the basic processes and the centrality of meaning, and also how it's both individual and collective, and how it's centrally emerged from this dialectic between same as others and more than or less than others on different dimensions.
That's excellent. I mean, I think this is in a nutshell expressing some of the theoretical principles and underpinnings that you articulated in our first office hours together a couple of months ago. So if people want to review a more full articulation of that self-other kind of dialectic and the individual and collective, and there were a number of these kinds of dialectical relations that you were elucidating as part of the way in which we understand meaning being made. Go back and listen to that. It's still very relevant and a very useful background. I also liked how you've brought in and some Ibn Khaldun just as a little garnishing, a little spice for that, since people know that I'm very interested in him and that you participated as well in conference on that. So hopefully, that'll be continuing. There may be updates on that as the project goes forward, but I'm glad to see it seeding itself here and you're sharing it with others. You probably want to follow the know yourself kind of the analysis with the knowing the enemy. Is that where you would like to elucidate what happens? So if we have this, understanding of meaning and narrative in knowing ourselves, in our relationship to others, well, how about from the other side? Like one other really important component for all growth and development, even just, generally, but also in Psywar, is understanding what are the goals, objectives, mentalities of the other, and in this case, the other being an enemy.
Right. So that's exactly what we're going to look at now. So, those systems of meaning, they have evolved over a very long period of time through communities, and they have given us those great, beautiful variety of different human civilizations, of different way of being collectively and individually in the world that have emerged in different forms all over this beautiful planet, right? And at one point, somewhere in Western Europe, some way of organizing things appeared known as capitalism. Now, capitalism is something very special because although we've had class struggle before, we've had exploitation before, we've had slavery before, we've had domination before, we've had all sorts of shitty stuff going on between humans, both individually and collectively before, capitalism did this thing that is absolutely fundamental to knowing what the enemy is about, which is to basically violently force the most human thing that there is, i.e., the ability to shape the world around you, your labor, to take this away from you through violence, through expulsion from the commons, but also colonial violence all over the world, to turn it into this thing called surplus value, commodities that are then sold to make capital and wasted so you can start again. So it literally extracts something that is essential to life, our labor, our control over what we do in life, to turn it into something that is dead, being capital, being waste eventually, right? So capitalism is this kind of unthinking algorithm that turns living things into dead stuff. That's what it does, and it's been ravaging this planet for the past 500 years. And so this analysis is something, I kind of sensed it, but I got it very theoretically from the work of Ali Kadri. And I think it's very important to understand it, because it means that the problem is not just, as a cursory reading of Marx could make us believe, that we are being exploited and we're not being given the real worth of our work, of our labor. No, that's not what it is. Is that what is most human in us, the ability to work for ourselves, to work our environment, to collectively decide our futures, is literally and through violence. It is never through consent. It is violence because you have no other way of existing. Or if you have another way of existing, they will send you gunboats, drones, bombs, proxies, and their foreign legions, whatever they call themselves.
Aircraft carriers.
Exactly. And also TV stations and social networks.
Yeah.
And so that process is literally, I was talking about when I was shitposting about George Orwell and his 1984. 1984 is not at all a picture of communism. 1984 is the project of capital through human society. It is totalizing, it is totalitarian. It cannot abide any social organization, any social nature, as Ali Kadri calls it, other than itself. For capitalism, which is almost an algorithm, it's almost like a artificial intelligence. Life is there to be chopped up in little pieces, turned into a commodity, then wasted so you can do it again until there is nothing left on this planet, right?
Yeah.
So that also means that it will literally target not just your material conditions of life, but also the systems of meaning inside of which humans all over the world have evolved for millennia, right? That means that to this algorithm, our minds are the target as much as any and all sovereign communities and nations, because self-determination is both individual and collective, and self-determination is the antithesis of this system, which doesn't want anybody to determine. They just want everybody to be part of that process of turning every living thing into a dead commodity, right?
Yeah. Dead commodity is a really important point, that it takes living labor, the energy of living beings, and turning all of that into, producing dead things. Yes. And you could even say, perhaps, I mean, maybe this is part of the extension of your point, is in a way that the targeting of our minds in this kind of trying to introduce their own viruses of narratives to take over your mind, is something that produces a similar kind of thingification, as one person in the chat put it, of commodifying thoughts things that can be part of this exchange value rather than use value of our minds even.
Absolutely.
And it reminds me very much, actually, and this is a book, and I'm just very much looking forward to a second conversation with Gabriel Rockhill, about the intellectual world war, which is a component, you might say, of the general psychological war that he mentions and talks about, is commodifying kind of thinking in a certain way that it's not part of your living socially connected existence, but abstracting them as objects that can be circulated and some can be considered high prestige and rare, and others kind of common and not so interesting, and so it's a market of like ideas rather than the real use value of ideas and of thinking. So this is really quite interesting.
I don't know if you're able to retrieve what I sent you to WhatsApp. There is a video, the last one speaks to this. So if you're able to retrieve it and to play it, Sina told me to exercise your StreamYard skills. No, he didn't.
Oh no,
I'm doing it. For
that's dangerous. I know. I really have to learn. I need a good sort of.
I can just describe it otherwise. So our friend R.I.P. George Habash, and by the way, rest in power, George Habash, because it was his the birthday, I think, of his passing last week. So yes, we fondly remember Comrade Habash for sure. And he was quoting also Michael Parenti, another departed dear person. So Parenti is very dear to me for two reasons. The first one is I love a communist who can speak in language every person on the planet can understand. One of the pollutions of Western Marxism is this idea that if you don't speak in the language, nobody understands the positionality of the subjectivity, of the coloniality, of the tugality and the powerality. You're not a serious intellectual. I don't believe that is the case. A serious intellectual is somebody who uses their intelligence to speak most broadly. So anyway, Comrade R.I.P. George Habash quoted Parenti saying, the essence of capitalism is to turn nature into commodities and commodities into capital. That's almost the most precise formula, but I would quadrify it by saying dead, by putting the word dead in there, because that's what's missing, I think, in the original Marxist analysis, that capital is not alive. It is a social relations, but it is not alive. It is actually turning living things into dead stuff. And that is central, and is going to be central to how also we demystify psychological warfare, and especially to how we resist it. So that's why I'm making this particular point here. And it's so totalizing that its project psychologically is to impose not just what, I don't think it was Mark Fisher, I think it's probably Jameson who once mentioned this capitalist realism, but it's imperialist realism, this idea that it's literally impossible, physically impossible to live in a different way, in a different organization of society, international relations, geopolitics, and even social relations than the one that is violently imposed on us and all our brothers and sisters through the global majority every day of the week by genocidal imperialism.
Yeah.
They need us to feel in our bones that resistance is futile, that there is no other way of being in the world. There is no alternative possible system of meaning inside of which we can live, which is why they hate sovereignty and self-determination more than anything. You don't even need to be a communist to be hated by them, although that helps a great deal. But the minute you want to so much as self-determine in the slightest way, you become a mortal enemy, because you threaten the totalizing idea that this is the only way to live. What they are selling you is the only way to live, when in fact, it is not only is it not the only way to live, but it is a way to die and to kill everything.
Yes. I mean, isn't this Maggie Thatcher? There is no alternative. I mean, she just basically said what
Exactly.
the whole sum of post-war capitalist consumer culture was meant to inculcate, the idea that there is no alternative. And, actually also just coming back to this book about, who paid the pipers of Western Marxism, that, is that also there were networks to promote those who theorized and developed, intellectual commodities that inculcated the very same idea that there wasn't a way of envisioning alternative pathways to a sustainable, just, or equal future. Everything still had to go through somehow this Western capitalist sort of model. And I think, just coming back to another point, I love these quotes from Capital, where he and we had a wonderful discussion with my friend and colleague David from University of Buffalo on Halloween, about kind of specters of Marx talks about the
capital is a vampire.
Yeah, and these vampires,
Literally.
the horror sort of horror genre, and it's so important in Marx's language to talk about this. And so Peapod says, will comradely offer that Marx did write of capital that it is dead labor, which vampire-like lives only by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks, right? So
exactly,
just like a vampire is dead, but it keeps itself in a semblance and facsimile of life by stealing life from others to perpetuate its zombie-like existence. That's another. He also talks about zombies as well.
We'll talk about zombie later. Yes, but
wonderful.
Absolutely, yes. But I don't think Marx was being metaphorical. It is literally turning
That's right.
living labor, i.e. self-determined labor, into dead labor, i.e. do this, do that, do the other thing, and not even to keep our society alive, like it might have been the case in Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt. No. You do this so that I can live on a pile that is inconceivable. Like the wealth of those billionaires is not conceivable. Like I don't know how much money this imperial system is giving you, Adnan, but I once tried to calculate, if I didn't, I'm well paid, and if I didn't spend any money at all, it would take me like 25,000 years to reach the wealth of Elon Musk. It makes no effing sense. We can't even comprehend what it is, but it shows you the total irrationality of the system. And you have people literally, like you see Elon Musk, willing to kill any number of people simply to make that pile bigger. It tells you there is something deeply inhuman about it. And, I came back to that point because, to me, to know the enemy is to understand what it is under the spell of. I don't even think it's capitalists the problem. They are as much slaves to the system as we are, except they are not the priority to be saved, okay?
Yeah.
Once we get it, it means that we are going to disillusion ourselves that the solution is to convince them to be a little bit nicer, to give us a little bit more, because you talked about social democracy, but there was one thing that was shared by all of those people, and it was anti-communism, and it was the hegemony of attacking all forms of actually existing socialism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was based from the beginning on continuing to extract value from the global south. And you extract value by making living people dead. And the further you get from the center, the more you literally make living people dead. Although at the moment it's coming back a little bit to the center.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in terms of narratives, it is inbuilt that it has to be supremacist, that it has to be totalizing. So it needs a narrative that says not only it's the only narrative possible, but why not? It's the best narrative. And when you go into the best side of things, then you're talking about supremacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to sending cops, armies, militias, proxies, all the rest of it, the system itself produces narratives that justify its material conditions, and inside of which its servants, but also its victims, are invited or forced to live. And the systems of meanings that this system produces or relies on and that allows us to reproduce can only be systems of meanings based on more than, less than. So this group of people are more than, in terms of fundamental basic human worth and dignity, than those. You know, it's a civilizing mission, it's the white man's burden. We are superior to them, therefore we deny them self-determination, we deny them sovereignty because we are superior to them, right? So you see how it has to go to that, because if you went, well, a Palestinian in Gaza is just as human as a Zionist settler, then the whole thing crumbles in a second, right? So you absolutely need that thing. The worker has as much human worth and right to determine what he does with his working day as the capitalist does. The whole thing crumbles. So you see how inbuilt is this thing in which the same and different dialectic is pulled towards the different, but not just different in many ways, but different in this fundamental way that totally reduces to nearly nothing the common humanity. And this is why those systems are always necessarily dehumanizing the other and dehumanizing their targets and their victims.
Yeah. I want to maybe in a moment come back to I think one point that you raised that you wanted to discuss was about these narratives that you're talking about and their kind of connection, or at least parallel to narcissistic dynamics. So looking at the pathologies of these supremacist narratives, how from a kind of psychological level we can connect both the macro kind of narrative hegemony and what its supremacist goals and purposes are to the kind of psychological dynamics. But before you tell us what you think about how those connections are, I just want to remind everyone that this is a fundraiser. There have been a number of wonderful people who have made donations, and I won't remember absolutely everybody, but Ramona, Omar, Jaziz, VM Roses, Asya, Mina, J. Abdul Malik, Danny Ferguson, P. Pod, Malinwe, Naturally Occurring Flaw, Red Kitty, Alex Bookbinder. Most recently, that's a wonderful showing. Maybe we can get a few more to round out before we still have, half an hour or 45 minutes or so of the typical office hours, 90 minutes. So we're kind of halfway. Maybe we can, boost this even further. I want to thank you for the donations you've made for the Ramadan, the Samir Project's Ramadan Iftar campaign. I'm going to throw the link again into the chat in case with all of this active discussion and comments, that it's not as at hand or accessible, so that you can, make a donation. Please do. But again, I want to thank everybody who so far has done. It's really inspiring and wonderful. So, okay. But also like the stream. I mean, Red Kitty put it, a comment, hey, like the stream. So yeah, if you haven't done that, you can. If there's more of you in here than have liked it, I'll take it personally that it's a commentary. You're not liking the discussion. Oh, Benji's like giving us jewels here. So like it. Okay, go ahead, Benji. More jewels.
Yeah. So you see that in terms of systems of meaning, in terms of narratives, it needs to naturalize the differences. Because otherwise, if you say, oh, I arbitrarily decided I was better than you, it's not, very convincing. So that's why it gives rise to those particular systems of meaning that I call supremacists. They justify exploitation, they justify domination, they justify racism, they justify conquest. And the more they naturalize it, which is something, according to the work of my good friend Adnan Hussein, that started around the time of the Reconquista and the Spanish Inquisition, with this idea of pure blood or something, the more it gives legitimacy to the system, to the world system. And this is why whiteness, this is why race, although it can change over time as to its contours, it's central to this imperialist system because it provides a naturalized basis for the exploitation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but be careful. Don't listen to that Adnan Hussein guy. Yeah,
No, I know. It's a weird guy. I'm told it's some kind of weird Islamist or something.
Absolutely.
Okay. And what's really interesting from the perspective of the humble clinical psychologist that I am is how much those systems of meaning, those collective systems of meaning, how much they share with narcissistic systems, family systems, or relational systems. It's no accident because, again, you see those systems emerge from very basic processes that we can actually identify in the lab, as I said in the first office hours. And then they take different forms, but they're kind of little holograms of one another, if you like. And so they also share common dynamics. So in a narcissistic system, you have a grandiose producer of an unrealistic narrative, which is monopolized. I'll use the Wizard of Oz image, right? By one wizard. And all around you have a whole society, a whole family, a whole, corporation or a country that has what is known in the Wizard of Oz as flying monkeys. So flying monkeys are people who serve the narcissist and their narrative, but they are more or less close to the center of oppression and production of narratives, and their interests are more or less linked to them, right? But they totally depend on the narcissist to keep going. And now if you think about imperialism, all those satrapies that you see all over the world that the system has installed are more or less, they're all dependent on the system. But, if you take the empire away, if you crumble the empire and its Zionist colony, their power will disappear nearly overnight. And we do know that.
Well, but it's like suppressing Starlink. Suddenly,
But one thing that's very important, and this you see in the clinic, and it's one thing I want to guard against, and tell people to not fall in that trap, is the narrative of sheeple, of people being stupid, of being manipulated against their own interests. At some level they are, because they are trapped into a machine that is a death machine, but the machine doesn't tell you it's a death machine, right? And when you're inside such a system and it's very dominant and it's in flaming glory, it's actually rational to stay inside of it. It makes sense. It's not crazy. It's not stupid. It makes sense. It may not be the purest sense. It may not be the most moral sense, but it makes material sense. It allows you to live in a way that is sort of okay. And also you have the attraction of the system of meaning, you know. They're
Yeah.
the best, they're the greatest, they have the best cars, the best food, the best science and technology, and the best philosophers.
Well, isn't that in some ways like, if I think about some of the critiques of Freud and psychoanalysis, it was sort of that, well, okay, this is a technique for bourgeois accommodation to, normal social life under kind of capitalism. And of course, what is the uh, definition of some kind of insanity or a kind of pathology or neuroses or these are things that take you out of being able to accommodate yourself comfortably within the system of meaning that has been created, and in some sense it is rational that you would have to kind of adapt to that because it's a totalizing kind of system. And when you put yourself at odds with it, or not even if you consciously do, but if there are aspects to your development psychologically, socially, etc., that just don't allow you an easy closure into that system, it actually is quite painful. It is constantly causing you anxiety or self-doubt, or like, why can't I understand why everybody else finds it totally normal to do this? So this is an interesting, kind of issue. It seems like you found some sort of way of talking about this, though, without sacrificing the radical sense that there is a material reality that has to be confronted, even if that is at disjuncture ideologically, culturally, with this system of meaning. I mean, is it a question really of having to be able to generate new narratives on the basis of perceiving material reality more clearly? There was another kind of point here, Jonathan 9LZN or 1ZN pointed out, capitalist mystification always attempts to falsely demystify via what sociologist Harmut Rosa says, to bring the world home, i.e. the logic of controllability. It seemed to be connected a little bit with what you're talking about, is that capitalism doesn't just mystify by giving you the false narrative. It tries to also say it is taking away all your old mystifications.
Yes.
Why, like previous models of meaning, why, like Marx said, capitalism is this very radical force because it totally disrupts, we're going to do business on Sunday. No more is it a Sabbath. Forget about that. No more is it a day of rest. You can't have that. So we need to destroy this other model, which may have been its own false narrative, but it was a coherent one that existed. And then it has to be displaced and destroyed. So it is always showing you that it is demystifying that, but it's in order to still mystify with some other. So I'm wondering, how you think of that and whether it connects with this narcissism that you're mentioning, because I noticed also that Sasha in the chat, wonderful to see you, Sasha, had said something about narcissists don't know themselves, right?
They don't.
Yeah.
So it's such a great point. Again, I go back to the dialectic of, and my understanding of dialectics has been greatly advanced by Comrade Alchemy, initiating me into the more kind of Chinese and Vietnamese way of thinking about dialectics. So dialectics is this idea that everything is this big whole, and inside this whole there are different, poles or contradictions or opposites. But the point is not to resolve them into something greater. They're always there. It's like literally the Chinese idea of yin yang. You can't have yang without yin or yin without yang, and you wouldn't want to. But this is what capitalism is doing in a way. It gets us into narratives which reduce increasingly the pole of common humanity in favor of the pole of supremacy, of more than and less than on the other side. And by doing that, it's actually taking leave of its senses. We're talking about capitalist rationality. It's rational if you want to kill everything and everybody on earth, but that's not really rational, right? but it has its own rationality in that sense, in the sense of its logic. So because of that, it is very similar also to a narcissistic system, because if you remember the fable of Narcissus, literally he was, he had this really cool partner called Echo, and one day, perchance, one is thirsty and he wants to drink in this beautiful still pond, and suddenly sees his image. He was a really good looking guy and is enthralled by his image, falls in love with it to the point of forgetting to drink, to eat, and not hearing Echo, who keeps on calling him, answering him. And eventually Narcissus dies because he doesn't feed himself. So it's a very interesting image, because it's basically, you disappear into the world of your own language, narrations, but with losing all contact with material reality. And there, remember Karl Rove, who is said to have famously said, because he never signed his name to it, that these are reality-based people, but now we're an empire. We create our own reality, and then you'll go and analyze it. And when we do that, we'll create our own reality somewhere else, which will then analyze. You see, that idea is taking lives of their material senses to the point that they've deindustrialized their country. They can't produce bombs at the rate that the Chinese and the Russians can, or missiles at the rate that the Iranians can. So those systems are inherently unstable. They are not about sustainable development, like sometimes they cloak themselves into. They will fall. It's like also a narcissistic family. A narcissist always falls, right? Always crumbles. The system always crumbles. So we need to know that, because and I'm now speaking as a licensed clinical psychologist, so you can take it to the bank. When a narcissistic family system is on the point of crumbling, that's where the narcissist becomes most grandiose, most threatening, makes most noises, claims to be able to do everything. And if you've listened to Donald Trump pretending to have weapons that nobody can even imagine, you probably can find echoes of that in what this guy is doing. Right. So how do we treat a narcissist, somebody who's a victim of a narcissistic system in the clinic? Well, I'll tell you how we can't treat them, is by trying to force them by pressure, lectures, or manipulations, because their own system of meaning, their own sense of identity is entangled inside the narcissistic system, in the same way that all of our identities are somehow, we talk about having our minds being colonized, whether we're on the side of the colonizers or the colonized. This is what it means. Our systems of meanings are entangled. So what we do when we do good clinical work with these people is we just hold space for them. We do all we can to understand the rationality of their experience, of their being in that system, while at the same time holding space for the possibility to live in a different world, a different system of meaning, one that simply says you are just as worthy as anyone else in the world, not more, not less, just as worthy, and therefore you are able to self-determine. So now if you listen to this, you can immediately see how it also works between societies, between communities, and between nations, right? We could go to Iran and say, okay, nobody says, as a living community, you have the full right to self-determine in whatever way you see fit, whether perfect or imperfect. If you're alive, you're imperfect, right? We're not going to tell you how to do that. If we think you could do it in a better way, well, maybe we could all space. Look here, this is what China is doing, actually, Geo. geopolitically. It's holding space for a different way of being. Is it perfect? Of course not. But you can see it moving in a particular direction materially that speaks for itself, and when most people look now to the world, so there is this very violent narcissistic system, the head of which we don't even know if it's in DC or in Tel Aviv or somewhere in between anymore. And those other guys over there who do things their own way, maybe not my way either. I'm not sure I would have boiled a chicken head for breakfast, but whatever. But you can see that it's going in the direction that serves everybody. And this one is just going in the direction of having people who look increasingly crazy, piling increasingly absurd sums of money while genociding increasingly large populations in the world for no other reason than just they're saying, well, we think we have a right to live our own way, right?
Yes, and I mean, that's I think a very important observation that same kind of narcissistic and supremacist, they go very well together, mutually informing, maybe even two sides of the same coin. Something that you can see at the individual level. You're talking about it in therapy, how to kind of deal with it, but that also in kind of larger scale relations, even in international sort of relations. I mean, this is what we see, is that the supremacist kind of perspective of the Zionist state's absolute need for total regional hegemony, right, is what erases the other. Is like, if you exist and have a self-determining or sovereign project that could challenge or rival or compete, it must be destroyed. It cannot be allowed to survive, because then somehow it feels that the totalizing narcissism would be dissolved if it doesn't have I mean, it's a bizarre contradiction, because it requires this object to constantly press out away from and project itself. But it's the very fact that there might be an other that could challenge and actually have real existence, that is seen as such an anxious threat that you have to do this kind of violence. And this is the same thing with the Musk, point that you were making is, and I think it's something we both share as like a real kind of concern about this transhumanist kind of, it's like, let's abandon this earth, let's abandon humanity, because we must and cannot be equal. Like, so what you were saying is like, no greater and no less. You're not less, and but you're also not greater. Is that there's this kind of pathology of being unable to accept a world in which you might have to be equal, because you think you're superior, and it's impossible for you to imagine. And this is why they cannot, the Zionists object so thoroughly to the notion of a democratic one state solution, is because it's impossible to allow yourself to be regarded as equal, to the other. So it's very interesting that the multiple levels, this structure that you're talking about actually replicates itself usefully as an analytic to understand quite a lot of international relations, social relations, and individual kind of, psychological dimensions.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for pointing out what Musk and Thiel are expressing is literally they are giving voice to the ultimate logic of capital, which is to kill all life on Earth, but even also kill humanity. This is the, eventual stop. The end station of dehumanizing the other is that you yourself pull yourself out of humanity. Well, humanity is too disgusting. Let's turn ourselves into machines. And machines are dead stuff. They are unalive. They will never come to live, because that's not how they are organized, at the molecular level. So, because these systems deny material reality, they are highly unstable and very destined to fall, destined to fail. And this you see, and But because they deny also material reality, they always retreat into narrative. Literally, in the most abusive narcissistic relationship, the narcissist wants to know everything you think, everything you read, everything you eat. And this is exactly what they're planning for Rafa, right? This camp, this biometric surveillance camp, where they are going to look at how you educate your children, everything you say 24/7. It goes into this madness. They want to control everything in life to just eventually kill it and get rid of it. But they also, in the process, get rid of their own humanity and their own lives. So that's the enemy. That's who we are. And now let's move to how we resist.
How do we fight? Yes.
How do we fight? Yes. Okay, so first, there's a weakness inside the system, and it's a bit philosophical, but I think it's very important that a dialectical whole cannot be reduced to any of its opposites. Therefore, it is unstable when it tries to do it. And when the resistance in Gaza talks about the free people of the world, this is what they're saying. They're affirming the fact that we all have common humanity. So they are already showing us an alternative system of meaning. We could all be free people of the world. We don't need to be part of this nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And this is why the consciousness of common humanity can and will arise in the heart of anyone. You have this poll that showed that 33% of Jewish Americans under 18 actually had sympathy for Hamas. Because as long as you're going to have conscious humans, you cannot kill the common humanity pole of the same and different dialectic. This is why there is absolutely no objective reason, no psychological reason ever to despair. This is why you can't kill an idea, as the resistance says, because it's inside the very processes that give rise to human consciousness. Next, we need to understand that narrative battles are fought with what? Language. That includes words, images, videos, stories, tone of voice, bodily posture, dances, everything that you want. And because they are fought with that, the strategic targets, not the only targets, but in terms of narrative, the strategic targets are the minds of the people, especially the minds of the free people of the world, because they can't abide by anybody being part of the free people of the world. They need us to feel that resistance is futile. The spirit of resistance needs to be either subjected, killed, or neutralized. And the or neutralized is very important, because it's enough for them if you're neutral, because then you're not a danger anymore, right? So literally being neutral in this war that they impose on all of us by trying to impose their narrative on the whole planet, neutrality is not an option, but it is one of their objectives.
Benji, are you saying you have to be part of a camp?
I am saying that there are two camps, only two camps, and praise Allah, God, and Marx together for
Holy
the universe and the yin yang for Ali Kadri.
Yeah.
Because Ali Kadri is the contemporary Marxist who has uncovered this logic, this death-dealing, life-extinguishing logic of capital. It's probably not the first one who's remarked upon it, but he's really systematized it in a way that I hadn't read since Marx, right? And therefore, what this tells us, and this is why it's important to think about imperialism, not just changing minds, hearts and minds. No. It's on one side you have the camp of death, and on the other side, you have the camp of life. And there are no other camps. And death is perfect in the sense that once you're dead, you're perfectly dead and it's over. And life is always imperfect, always messy, sometimes smelly, sometimes makes you sick, sometimes makes you afraid. Da, da, da. It's life, guys. It's never perfect, my Trotskyite friends. It can't be, because it's alive. And there is no in between. What is there between life and death? Zombies, maybe. You see, we're back to zombies.
Right.
But I don't believe in zombies. And every single political force that says, I'm neither this nor that, is actually arguing for political zombieism.
Uh-huh.
First, I don't believe in it. And even if I believed in it, I wouldn't be part of it. You know why? Because zombies, do you know how they live? By eating your brains out. Don't let zombies eat your brains out, brothers and sisters. There is neither Washington nor Moscow, neither Washington nor Beijing, neither Washington nor Tehran, neither Washington nor Hamas, neither Washington nor Hezbollah, neither Washington nor Yemen, neither Washington nor... Give it up already. There is life, the side of life, and the side of death. There is nothing in between that I've ever met. But if I meet a zombie, you know what I'll do? Two things. Either I run in the other direction really fast because they move slow. That's the good thing. Or else I understand that a baseball bat, but that's a little bit gory, right?
Well, there are different forms of resistance. Let's just say that. But the zombie eating the brains of others, now that is Psywar, right?
That is Psywar.
I mean, that's exactly Psywar. And that is, in fact, actually the purpose for people like us. Okay, I'm not talking about the right-wing fascists. They've got their own issues, but the Psywar is really for people who might actually be persuaded or realize that they need to resist this terrible, inhumane, system. So the Psywar is to move them from, possibly being in the camp of life to being zombies, and the zombie, zombification of liberal kind of like accommodationist discourse that convinces you that the forms are radical, but when in fact actually the interior components and the substance is nothingness, like it's meaningless, but it's to tell you that there is this meaning around various kinds of forms, the identity, without like it being connected with material bases of reality, right? Like that. So that seems to be a really great analogy, the zombie for the Psywar, actually.
Yes, for the Psywar on our sides. Now, Yanis Varoufakis, you be a zombie on your side, but stop trying to eat the brains of my comrades, right?
Yes.
And remember that as it does this, as it neutralizes you, the next thing it does is it tries to commodify every single one of your experience. And all these apps for, dating and stuff. I saw a new app that came out in which you can actually bet on your friends. So I bet your girlfriend won't come home, his girlfriend won't come home before 10 p.m. And you can actually place bet on that. I mean, imagine the level of taking every life out and turning our worst thoughts, our most, smelly, ridiculous thoughts into something to be turned into commodity, money, and what. If you don't understand that it's trying to kill everything, you've missed it. But the problem the system has is because of its retreating into its own stories, disappearing up its own backside, drinking its own Kool-Aid, it's lost any actual solid contact. It's been a gradual process with the material reality, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so the alliances it used to make were on the basis of supremacy. Come and join whiteness, come and join Western civilization, come and join the fight against whatever, barbarism. But the material basis for it is disappearing. And this is why you're seeing it shake in every which way. And what we have to do on our side is simply remember all the time, never forget, and you can't forget it if you look into your heart, that recognizing common humanity is the wellspring of resistance. And
Like
as much a part of consciousness as recognizing differences between us. And in fact, it's one and the same process. So don't let them convince you that you can have one without the other. You can't have difference without sameness. You can't have supremacy without radical equality in humanity. So from this, it follows that our strategic objectives, therefore, must be to nurture systems of meaning, of common humanity, dignity, and self-determination for all. Once you say self-determination for all, and I believe this is what the Chinese government is doing, you don't go around the world telling people, you should organize your society like this, you should do like that, you should have, you should have your justice system like this, your police like that, your economy like that, because once you start doing this, you are basically going on the side of the supremacists. And it's kind of hard for us to get because we want, Lenin to go and fight the good fight and right now and get rid of Salman bin whatever he's called.
Yeah. Mohammed bin Salman.
Right.
Yes.
And we need to always remember the material mental dialectic. We need to dismantle the material systems of oppression, imperialism, because if we don't take this as a target, we will never be able to uphold alternative systems of meaning, right? This is not a retreat into everything is narrative like they believe. It's seeing the two sides of the dialectic and being always keeping an eye on both of them all the time. This is why we need to be imperialists, and this is why we need to be campists. We need to be campists because there are only two camps, the camp of life and the camp of death. And from this follows that our speech, everything we say and do, wait for it, contributes to systems of meanings, ours and that of others. Literally everything. This is how, we come in the clinic, people come with their own personal history. Everything they've said and done and thought has contributed to their system of meaning in terms of who they are in relation to themselves and to others. And it's the same whenever we interact with other people. And so what we do with others and what we do with ourselves can do two things. It either makes us and others feel that what we say and do is meaningful or meaningless, that life can have meaning or that life doesn't have any meaning or maybe no meaning outside of the imperial narrative and political economy. Therefore, brothers and sisters, everything that you put out there in the world is actually ammunition in the narrative war, whether you know it or not. Every single tweet, every single Facebook post, every single thing you say around the water cooler is ammunition. At best, at worst, you go against your side. At best, you nourish the spirit of resistance. And in between, you're neutral, which means you actually nourish the empire. Okay.
Yes. I mean, that's a very important point. I think when you said at the very outset, we're all in the Psywar, whether we want to be or not, it is because the very texture of life now involves maybe, I don't know about the water cooler. That was a public space. I mean, like if you're, in the private sphere, I don't know if these distinctions mean anything anymore, but, with your family or whatever, maybe you could say like there isn't much at stake politically. You can express in a safe space your concerns, your doubts, and then receive support and solidarity. And maybe it's not damaging to anything. In fact, maybe it's necessary in order to, heal, recommit, etc. But if you are out in social media on these platforms, as you say, it is the public sphere. It is out in a public platform. It is ammunition, as you're saying, in one way or the other. And so this is something that's very important. That
also in your private chats with your comrades, with your friends.
Well, yes, because those are social relations. But as I say, like, those can be recovered dialectically, right? Because
Yes.
you're actually in a real social relation where you can be corrected, you can be encouraged, you can be, like, so even if you are contributing because you have self-doubts or queries, or you're feeling despair, etc., there are some contexts in which sharing that is a means to restoring and healing and recommitting and dead. But if you are just throwing things out into the public sphere, for sure you are not contributing at all. You are doing damage. And we've seen a lot of cases and examples of this, even people who clearly are committed in a profound way to the camp against the empire, but nonetheless they are circulating defeatist or frustration. And we understand it is extremely frustrating, but we are not, one has to understand what
it's frustrating, comrades, but we're in a war. We are not in a spectator sport where our team is going to lose once again. That's not what it is about.
Right. Well, I mean, this is the thing, is that people recognize in a way they're in a war, but they allow themselves to circulate the idea that we may or are being defeated, rather than that we are always resisting. Doesn't mean you're always winning, but there is no linear path towards victory. And this is another important point that I think I reacted to when how to fight the Psywar effectively. One thing I thought of, and I wonder what you thought about this, is how, you said, you put it as like we have to keep our resistance materially and psychologically standing, surviving, upright, capable until victory. This is an important point to me, is there is such a thing as victory. I mean, so much of leftist groupings and discourse sometimes is...
And before victories, you know what? Before victory, there are only defeats.
Right,
exactly. Speaking, right?
It's like they don't envision that there is the possibility of victory. It's only an abstract kind of notion, rather than we need concrete kind of understanding of what...
And that is actually a psychological victory of empire, right? Once you start losing track of the dialectic, and you think it is actually humanly possible to live in a world in which supremacy reigns supreme, you have lost track of the dialectic. And you're fallen on their side. Comrade, you need first aid. You need psychological and political first aid, because we don't work like this. We don't function like this. That's why I take the time to go back to basic processes, because those basic processes inform us that their goal is simply impossible. So yes, we are going to go from defeat to defeat until final victory. That's by definition. And defeats are painful.
They are.
But defeats, just like victories, are nothing if not occasions to learn. And this is what life is about. Life tries different things, and some work, and you do more of them until you get, hit by something, and then you do less of that. And this is the messy business of life. But that's not in itself a problem. So what is to be done? Like our friend Lenin would say, that you quoted.
I put in a quote from Lenin.
Number one is to understand that imperialism is the enemy, not just of the working class, but of life, and build a new global, revolutionary, collective, but also individual consciousness on that. I mean, they're such enemies of life that they violate all norms, not because they're pedophiles in the psychological sense, but because they violate norms. I just saw today that effing Bill Gates was slipping antibiotics into his wife's food because he caught STDs on Epstein Island, right? I mean, imagine the violation of the sovereignty of the human you have taken for a wife to do that, instead of going to her and say, whatever. Anyway, it didn't go well when he said what he didn't say when he was exposed, because she upsticked and went. So anyway, this is what we need to do, and understand that there are just two camps, and we are not there to criticize people who are trying to live against the death machine. We are there to defend them. And we need to learn, especially us Westoids, from those who have learned the hard way, the lessons of how to resist imperialism. That is not from Westoids, because we haven't learned. If we had learned, it wouldn't be raining death on the rest of the world. So we need to shut our big mouth and listen to others, right?
Yeah.
And here I'm going to talk about Martyr Bassel al-Araj.
Thank you. Okay, I was going to say, if we don't get to it now, I'm going to just...
But before I do that...
We'll talk about it.
And in honor of Kala, who I'm going to have a convo on Cyclib with tomorrow, Kala Watch.
Oh, great.
As Amilcar Cabral said so justly in The Weapon of Theory, I believe, tell no lies and claim no easy victories. I am not, arguing for a Pollyannish view. We should never tell any lies about victories or defeat, and never claim any easy victories. There will be no easy victories against death. Certainly not. It's going to be hard. It's a generational struggle. Maybe we won't see the end of it. Maybe we will. That's not for us to decide. A defeat is not a victory. We shouldn't claim it's a victory, nor is it the end. And defeats, again, and victories are nothing other than opportunities to learn. So let's start with our friend Martyr Bassel al-Araj, who wrote for Palestinians, but I'll speak of his eight rule. He had 8 rules. The 8th rule is every Palestinian, in the broad sense, meaning anyone who sees Palestine as part of their struggle, regardless of their secondary identities, every Palestinian is on the front lines of the battle for Palestine, but for humanity more broadly. So be careful not to fall in your duty. That's rule number 8, but it's good that we remember, because we are all part of the Palestinian struggle in that sense, not because we fetishize Palestine or whatever, but because this is where the empire has decided to concentrate all its fire, and this is where we must meet it. The enemy, rule number 2, will spread photos and videos. It's part of psychological warfare. In guerrilla wars, we never judge the battle by its forms or by what is going on, even less by the losses of this side or that side. We judge it by the ultimate results. If we look, for example, at Al-Aqsa flood, Tufan Al-Aqsa,
yes,
the ultimate result is the empire has never been so naked. Please pray for every single one of those people who gave their lives, who gave their whole families for them, their whole, bloodlines, to make it unavoidable to the rest of the world what we are faced with. And by the way, one way you can honor those martyrs is by giving to the Samia Project right now. Rule number 3, never spread, and it's the most important for all of us who are on social media in one way or another, never effing spread the occupation's effing propaganda. Do not reproduce anything that comes from Axios, the New York Times, the whatever, until it's been confirmed by official sources. Until the Iranian government has said anything, don't spread anything at all, except to mock it, maybe ridicule it in such a context that you are just taking the piss, right? But don't spread it. Don't contribute to instilling a sense of defeat. Never spread panic. Don't be like Chicken Little. Don't go, oh, it's the worst thing ever. They have been, they do everything they can and they never face any punishment or whatever. This is the worst time. No. If you know how a narcissistic system works, you don't do that. If you want to help people out of them, you go, yeah, it's getting really bad now, but, aren't they losing their marbles a little bit? Something like that.
Yeah.
Forget about the ethics and impartiality of journalism. Just as Zionist journalists is a fighter, so are you. Hey, if what you say because you don't have the information is proved wrong 1 week from now, who gives a fig? You're not, you're not going for the Pulitzer. Anyway, the Pulitzer is a compromised, corrupt price, like all their prices are. You are there to support your side, the side of life. And, if next week you learn that life was extinguished at this place where you said it was still there, too bad. But why would you say it's gone when your source is the imperial media? Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, read Basil El-Araj. It was written in 15 or something. It's in the book, I Found My Answers. In 2014, I remember now, after one of the assaults on Gaza, the enemy may broadcast images with the goal to suggest the rapid collapse of the resistance. Do not believe them. The guy, did he see what has been going on over the past 2 weeks or something? They will carry out tactical qualitative operations to assassinate some symbols of resistance. All this is part of psychological warfare. Their goal is to influence the resistance's support base and the families of the resistance fighters, as they are the only ones who can affect the men of the resistance. And this is why we need to materially support the people who are fighting by contributing to those
families, those appeals, yes, of all the people. I mean,
of all the people. The people is the water in which the resistance fights. We need to support them. And by the way, I'll say this, I'll say it later. Don't trust anybody who doesn't. Don't trust any influencer. Don't trust any pundit. Don't trust any journalist. Don't trust any analyst who makes a name for themselves on any kind of media and doesn't urge you to materially support the people who are actually fighting. Those people are, whether they know it or not, part of the imperial machine, because they tell you that there is no material way to support the resistance other than making a name for yourself on the fucking internet. That is absolute nonsense.
And the people in and of Palestine know that these people are not with them and that they resent very much the way in this kind of world of social media it's possible to exploit, the suffering and the just resistance of the Palestinians for their personal gain. I mean, this is just as vampiric as the structures of capital. In fact, it's even worse because it pretends to be, expressing, this sympathy divorced from actual material solidarity, right? So this is, I think, a very dangerous...
It's what we know in the trade as liberalism, being the midwife of fascism.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, when Sheikh Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated, it felt a big blow because he is such a symbol of resistance, so articulate, so defiant, and so prescient about many, many things, that of course it felt like a huge blow. However, it was not the end of resistance. It was it was a loss. It was a defeat of its kind. But as we've been pointing out, and as one of the later principles of Martyr Basil El-Araj, is that our direct human and material losses will be so much greater than the enemy's. That's the nature of the pathological perversion, of the fact that they have these resources and no compunction of using these deadly weapons to commit mass slaughter, even as they avoid actual,
And Adnan, also our psychological losses will be greater because we are on the side of life and on the side of love. Resistance is an act of love. These people have no connection to anything like love. I mean, sleeping antibiotics in your good lady wife's tea. So that,
Well, I feel like that's what I mean in some ways when he says our direct human losses, because every aspect of the human is what we are defending. Every aspect of the human is the resource that we have in our resistance. So just as you say, those sentiments, that human values, the love, those are going to affect us, and we have to learn how to process. And I just think of like Lara Shihai, whenever, we have these tanky group therapies or on struggle sessions, and she's been a wonderful panelist on those live streams several times. She, and in Psychic Militancy, her new podcast, but we had an office hours early, in September on Psychic Militancy. And she, really taught me in a way, if you are feeling, depressed, that's normal. That's that's how we're going to feel. Lean into it, use it. Don't try and avoid it. It's not about getting past it. It's like, we're not going to get past it. These are losses. And this is one thing that I have felt in some ways during this whole period, and actually coming to recognize it has given me a certain kind of strength that I never would have expected, from the realization that I have felt that even if in a decade or 2 decades, if this has to go on this long before the fall of this empire and the fall of the Zionist entity, it will still pain me. It will still hurt me. What we are witnessing and going through now, it will never go away from
Adnan, one thing we do in
the cost that we are having to pay, and realizing that it will still hurt me. It means I can bear this daily pain in a way that I didn't think I would, and keep struggling, keep talking, keep, working, in solidarity.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing we do a lot, I do in grief work, is get to the point where you realize that your pain for the loss is actually a function of your love. And the only way to not grieve the loss is to not love anymore. And once you get to that place, most of us actually choose to love, therefore to continue grieving. And if you don't love anymore, you lose meaning, and then you go on their side. But there was a point made in the comments that, families who are dead in Gaza have already lost the war. And it speaks to rule number 7 of Martyr Bassel al-Raj, where it says, today's wars are no longer just wars and clashes between armies, but rather are struggles between societies. And it's like between different systems of meanings, between what Kadri calls social nature, right? And when you are part of a society, even if your whole family dies, you haven't actually lost the war as part of the society. It's thinking of the individual as part of the collective, and it's been the rational choice for many individuals. This is what martyrdom is about, to choose to work and at times die in the service of your community. When you do that, you are not losing anything. You are actually honoring your being part of the society. This concept of martyrdom is really hard for Westerners to get somehow, but I think it's very new because, we had the resistance in France, and we literally have statues that are called to the martyrs of the French resistance, right? So we understand that concept. You do not die, you do not lose when you die. You die when you lose meaning, and you lose when you lose meaning, right? Like Che Guevara said, I have seen many people die who didn't fight for fear of dying. and it's also psychological death. You psychologically die when you become neutral, when you let yourself be neutralized, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, what you've said there really brings to my mind a different way of interpreting and understanding the Quranic verse about the martyrs. That is, very significant and important in the resistance, that it's not just this kind of like theological, that people might not necessarily buy into this kind of theological
I
way.
mean, it's not just about the 72 virgins.
No, yeah, they
Well,
have other
I'm not too sure about this resistance
right.
anymore. I was rather
it is the verse is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, La taqulu liman yuqtal fi sabilillah amwat bal ahya'un walakin la tash'urun. Never say that those martyred in the cause of God are dead. In fact, they are alive, but you don't perceive it. There's a social interpretation of that you were just sort of giving, that the society, you may have these losses, these people may be taken away from us, but they're not really socially dead, in the sense that they still are contributing in a powerful and meaningful way to the resistance and to our collective solidarity in an important way. It's just that we are not perceiving it typically. We're told, oh, you suffered a loss. That's the Psywar, to say, no, you've lost, you've suffered these losses. How could you live again? And the reversal is to declare, no, there is still life in this, even in, by maintaining the resistance, we are maintaining the social life.
And you see, for a godless person like me, not by choice, by the way, just by fact, if I'm really honest, I understand, and I'm not trying to disparage belief at all, not at all, but God gives you a system of meaning that is greater than yourself, and you can find it in different places. You can find it in community, you can find it in communism, you can find it in many things, but it will make your death meaningful because it's part of that system of meaning. If it's just because you want to bet more on the future markets of what time your best friend's girlfriend will come home, that doesn't really compare in terms of granularity and positionality of meaning.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean, and that's that's why I was saying you don't have to just theologize it, because you could say in the cause of justice, in the cause of freedom, right? I mean, this is the same, it has the same resonance and the same meaning ultimately, even if you don't put it in those theological terms. But I mean, this is exactly the point, is that we're sort of trained to think that there isn't anything higher than yourself. And this is capitalism, especially in this consumer capitalism, liberalism, this fetishizing of the individual outside of a social context. So yes, we believe in freedom, we believe in rights. It's just that, in fact, actually, those aren't really going to be fulfilled unless you have, in a social totality, the destiny, the sovereignty, the self-determination that you were talking about. Is we tend to only think about it in Western capitalist discourses as an individual framework in which one understands it, without recognizing that even that individual framework has constraints of material, social, economic, and political reality. And the only way to have freedom, self-determination, liberation is by having equality and justice. And then we all end up flourishing as human beings. So this is the same kind of notion. It doesn't it's just that there is the only way out of this is to have the kind of empathy and solidarity where the meaning you've been talking about is higher than just the selfish ends of the individual, divorced from other factors of connection in society and in life. And you're not really living if you are living only alone according to your own will in a kind of context that doesn't actually reproduce dialectical social relations together. So I feel like, you know, we often on the kind of secular left get hung up on the theological language, but, you know, don't recognize or see the genuine meaning that is at the root of it, that can be shared with different vocabulary, with different kind of resonances, but it's the fundamental social relation and social meaning that is, you know, most relevant and most important in that context. And I think Lydia Cruddy here said something valuable, and we do get to see Benji's dog, who is
I want Patmos Revelator to say I rock.
right.
I don't really rock, but the dog does rock.
Yeah, that's right. I think most Westerners understand martyrdom. They can find examples of their martyrs if they think about it, right? And you have to go back in history and see that. But the word has been used as an Islamophobic cudgel for decades, right? They're so different. They don't care about life. They fetishize death, when in fact it's actually the reverse. You know, that's what we've been seeing. So yeah.
I rock. Okay, so time is of the essence, as they say.
Yes.
I got two more things to get through. One very short is general mental and emotional hygiene for each and every one of us. You already covered one of those bases. Let ourselves feel everything as fully as we have to feel it. Remember that the pain comes from the love. If you don't care, you don't have any kind of psychological pain. So it comes from the love. Let ourselves feel everything, but not act on every single feeling, right? Learn to recognize the effects of Psywar ammunition exploding in our minds. Look at what you felt, what you imagined since this Iran offensive started. I forget when, let's say 2 to 3 weeks ago. Intellectually, emotionally, I've been all over the effing shop, right? But once you know that my mind, your mind, everybody's mind, because this is the way systems of meaning work, are vulnerable to this stuff, we can recognize the impact. So, you know, when it's a piece of Psywar ammo exploding, you don't mistake it for a revelation about the future. No, it's just a piece of Psywar of ammo exploding. So of course you're going to go through these things. Then reconnect, and this is very important. There was a bit of a back and forth, I think, in Thank You Therapy session when I was in the comments with someone else. And I was trying to make the point that some of us, even Westoids, maybe increasing number of us Westoids, are going to actually face individual costs for saying what we're saying. We are going to face it. You know, it's already in Britain where they will literally bang at your door at 5 a.m. for social media posts. There was this lady in France, 18 months in jail for pro-Palestine social media posts. It's going to happen to increasing individuals. And I was saying individually, we need to reconnect to the free people of the world when this happens to us. And the person said, you need to do it collectively. Except when the cops bang at your door at 5 a.m., you're actually alone, my friend. But you're not alone if you connect with the free people of the world. If you remember that you are part of this greater thing, then that is, and Sasha is doing wonderful research on Sumud. And, you know, of course, this is, our Palestinian comrades can say it better than ever we can, but they literally describe how this is how they can survive, this is how they can resist, even in jail and facing conditions that are not going to come to us that quickly. They may eventually come, but they're not the kind of, you know, sadistic, sophisticated, high-tech torture that our brothers and sisters in Palestine have to face. But if you reconnect to the community, if you reconnect to the fact that you are part of this broader meaning, you are part of this it could be, religious, spiritual community, whatever, you are part of humanity, you will always be able to reconnect to the free people of the world inside your heart. They will speak to you and they will tell you how to resist, including what materially might happen to you. So that's very important to say. And finally, we're getting to the end of it, quick and dirty advice as to how to resist and be an effective fighter in that, in addition to, of course, the great principles of Bashar al-Raj. Find them somewhere, learn them off by heart, because they are essential.
I put a link in the chat.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. One is regarding consuming. Note how what you consume makes you feel. In particular, if you're like me, watching lots of talking heads to understand the world, note how each and every one of those make you feel, and trust your feelings, right? Mm-hmm. If they make you feel like, oh my God, it's all over, be careful. Don't be too black and white. Sometimes we need to hear some difficult truths, that's for sure. Yes. But over time, you notice them. Beware of big names, especially on social media. Like Chomsky famously said to Andrew Ronsley, I think in Britain, who said, are you suggesting that I get my orders from MI5? And Chomsky said, no, I'm not suggesting this. I'm suggesting that if you didn't think and weren't thinking and weren't saying what you're thinking and saying, you wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. Of course, the irony is Chomsky himself wouldn't have been where he was if he hadn't been thinking and saying what he was saying, no BDS, blah, 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 to state and all that bullshit, anti-communist nonsense. So this is also true on social media, right? Yeah. So be careful of these people who have big, big followings and do nothing materially to help the resistance. Inviting the same roster of anti-imperialist, ex-CIA talking heads as everybody else does, and talking a big game against the empire is not resistance. To me, in addition to noticing how they make me feel, sensationalist titles are a red flag. This changes everything. The final this, the ultimate that, the blah, blah. Come on, you can't have a final battle every single day of the week. You think about the psychological effect of this nonsense, right? We're in a generational struggle, and we have people producing content that says, this changes everything, the final that, the last 5 minutes. It's not good. And as we said earlier,
I feel like in that context, Benji, this is why some sense and understanding of history is so important, to have a longer view of the struggle, the victories, the losses, the setbacks, the techniques of survival. Just knowing that the moment you're in is a moment. They can be decisive moments, but that's only if the structures are set and you see that there's a lot of exaggeration happening all the time. So yeah, that's a very important...
Do an American accent, Benji. Son, your ego is writing checks that your body can't cash. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Nobody knows. Okay, so if they don't do something material for the resistance, find somebody else to listen to. So that's for the consuming. And for the production, everything you say or do is ammunition, is a drop in the flood. Remember that. It can have only 4 functions, and generally it has 2 of those. Either what you put out will nourish the resistance, or it will weaken the resistance, right? It will make you and others feel that resistance is fertile or that resistance is futile. Everything. You may not know it in advance, but eventually it will have this effect. So learn to anticipate what effect it might have. And on the other side, it will either inflate the imperial ego, hey, they have weapons we don't even know of. They are able to corrupt everybody in Venezuela, and it was all a plan with and the CIA. And did you see the picture? Or it will deflate the imperial ego. It's literally a matrix. You'll find it on my Substack. Before you put something out, if you're not sure, think, okay, from what I know of the world, from what I know of my own way of looking at the world, this thing I'm putting out, where is it going to fall on these four things? If you're able to do these two things, be mindful of what you consume and be even more mindful of what you produce, you are going to actually be able to materially fight this battle, and also send as much as you can until it hurts to the people who are fighting on the actual, material battlefield somehow, or then you are going to make a material difference. Nobody is too small. Nobody is insignificant. No word is insignificant. So don't go all panicked saying, oh my God, I must watch everything I said. That's not what I'm saying. But, be deliberate, be purposeful in what you do, connect to the free people of the world of which you are one, and you will hasten the day that we win. And I will finish by a quote from the great George Jackson.
Wonderful.
Settle your quarrels, come together, understand the reality of our situation, understand that fascism is already here, that people are already dying who could be saved, that generations more will die or live poor, butchered half lives if you fail to act. Do what must be done. Discover your humanity and your love in revolution. Pass on the torch. Join us. Give up your life for the people.
Beautiful. And free Palestine. Exactly. Benji, that's wonderful. And thank you so much. I know so many people have expressed how much it means to them to have your insights and encouragement. This has been such an important topic that really touches upon our everyday reality, because we're online, we're watching, we're subject to this Psywar, and we need to learn how to resist it. And this has been such an encouraging and helpful conversation. And also, I just want to point out that it has also raised quite a bit of support for the Samir Project's Ramadan Iftar campaign. I don't know if I can mention everybody, but including David Yagubian, former guest on your show very recently, and I encourage everyone to go listen to that wonderful conversation between Benji and David. Also, he was on Office Hours 2 weeks ago. Wonderful colleague, friend, and also Brandon Wolf Honeycutt, who was a student of David Yagubian's and is now a professor of Middle Eastern history and wrote a wonderul book on Iraq. Thank you.
Passing the torch. That's it. That's it. That's
passing the torch. Yeah, absolutely. And a number of other people: Ramona, Omar Jaziz, VM Roses, Asyamina, J. Abdul Malik, Danny Ferguson, Peapod, Melanway, Naturally Occurring Flaw, Red Kitty, Alex Bookbinder, Stew of Matt, and
it's not the usual suspects. It's
not all
the solid comrades.
Some of them are people we've seen in the chat who loyally come, and I so much appreciate you coming and donating. But there are also a lot of people who have been donating anonymously. I can't say that they were all in our stream, but I can see that what had been at low 19,000 pounds. At the start of the stream, at least there's been a flurry of activity, whether from us, and some of it is definitely from us. It's now close to 20,000, 19,992 pounds.
We have to get it over.
We should actually. Let's get it over.
Let's get it
into 20,000. If
we absolutely need, because I'm autistic, so I need the numbers to be round. Otherwise, it doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we do. That should be a sine qua non. We have to get a nice round.
Let me see what I can do for that.
Let's see. I think I can do something here.
Here we are.
Make
Here
sure
we
that
go.
we do get above.
Let's see that number
We have to
moving.
do
Let's see
that.
it moving. Come on, come on.
Okay. Oops. Oops. Yeah.
There we go. Return to the campaign.
Close. We're very close. I think, people. We're very close.
2013. Keep it up. Keep it up. If you're watching this not live, please do donate to the Psywar project and say in the comments that you've donated, that you've been inspired to donate.
Always come back to the video after you, as you're watching, and you can put into the regular comments that that you donated, and we will do it again next week as well. Like, this is a weekly program. I don't know who I've got on next week.
Donate and the dog gets an extra treat tonight.
Oh, wow. That's
Look
fabulous.
at that.
I do also want to note that I have a bonus mega marathon doubleheader office hours on Monday coming up. I have 2 guests. We're going to be live on Iran. Okay, so I've got a guest, Ali Alizadeh. In the morning at 11 a.m. We will be, talking about Iran, and I think we're going to kind of frame it as strategic patience versus, preemptive strike. Like, there's a lot of changes taking place.
His interview on the Attrition podcast is a must-see to understand, the politics of the Islamic Republic since 79.
It was
amazing.
Excellent. And watching that, I mean, I had seen him on the Gray Zone recently, and I try and watch whenever he does Jadal in English, but he's been doing an awful lot in Farsi because of the need, to speak to his community. But I heard that, but when I heard the attrition, I was like, I have to get him on because this analysis is very, very significant. And I had further questions that I want to raise. So please do attend. It's at a special time. It'll be 11 a.m. We're getting the title cards and things ready. So I haven't made the stream, but he's all set to come on. And then my former PhD supervisee, Milad Dokhanji, who's in Tehran and who I saw last month and hadn't seen him for several years, visited him and reconnected with him. He has been there, obviously, through recent events, but since the 12-day war, etc. And we will be talking with him at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. for a second sort of office hours live stream on Monday. And that should be very interesting as well to get somebody. Now there's been a little restoration of internet service. So he said he could come on and talk about what it's been like, inside Iran. So please do come.
And what's I think it's the longest cycling I ever did with David. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. We could have gone on for 4 hours. After that conversation, I was literally looking for flights to Iran. It made me want to. It made the country alive to me. It wasn't a political entity anymore. It wasn't a political idea anymore. It was like, wow. I loved it. And
it's so interesting that you put it that way, because that's exactly how I felt that the visit transformed it from a cause and a political idea. And of course, I read a lot, I've studied its history, so I can identify and empathize, but it still is abstract. And you see it through the frame of the issue. And it was so good to get a texture of what life is like, because that's what we're fighting for, is for people to live, right? So I agree completely, and you definitely, hopefully, will get a chance someday, Benji, to visit. But,
and I had a great conversation with Nina Fania, so I'd like to plug it. It's only 1 hour long, but it's worth every minute. So please, give it a whirl on the Substack.
So anyway,
and someone said, I just want to, sorry for interrupting,
where they can listen.
It's on our Substack. You can put it in the comments and stuff, But someone said somewhere, but I'll say it in my words, that they had been looking for content producers, as Sina insists on calling us, that didn't make them feel defeated and hopeless, and they finally found this tanky universe. And I resonate with this because I got, I started speaking because of you guys. It's all your fault, especially Sinners and this haircut. And but yeah, and suddenly I I found a place. So parasocial isn't always bad because, you know, there was a system of meaning that I could actually fit into. And yeah, thank God for that, because it's such a happy place. Plus, we have the cutest dogs.
Yes, indeed. Both of you have very cute dogs. It's true. And I think it was Asya Mina who posted that. I mean, we all, you know, that's one of the benefits of this, is building some sense of community and solidarity, and recognizing that even though you may know few people, and this has been my experience this like last 2 years, is feeling so uncomfortable in almost every social or professional space in my life, at the university, elsewhere, you know, is feeling like, oh, nobody is objecting to the fact that should be abnormal to have a genocide going on, and instead they're treating it and acting as if this is a normal thing that you can tolerate. And I couldn't tolerate that. But when you come to some spaces here and you realize there's more of us, we just need to start being a little more courageous about finding those moments in those spaces where we can say, this is not normal. What is abnormal is that there is a genocide going on and we're not doing anything about it. So the more we can take encouragement and get that support to fight the Psywar, because as Benji said, we're always fighting the Psywar. Everything we're doing is ammunition. So let's get armed. Let's get dangerous, you know, in the Psywar, and do what we can. I want to thank everybody again. Go check out.
It's over £1,000. We've raised over 1,000 British pounds. Take this, Keir Starmer.
Yeah, take that. That is actually quite, you know, quite big. You know, that's great for you know, a little 2-hour you know, stream. I'm very proud of all of you for, you know, being defiant Psywar insurgents. You know, this is a guerrilla war, and you should go check out Resistance is Fertile on Substack. Go to substack.com/Resistance is Fertile podcast. And oh yeah, that's a great collection. That's a great collection.
Wow.
That's right. And I want to just, you know, thank you again.
For educational purposes only, of course.
Yes. Well, I mean, we're doing, you know, geography lesson here, as well as a psychology lesson.
Longue durée history.
That's my game, man. That's what it's all about. So thank you all. And we'll see you hopefully on Monday, and go watch back some of the episodes on Resistance is Fertile. Very important. And we'll see you, inshallah, on Monday. Until next time. Solidarity and peace with justice. Free Palestine.
Free Palestine.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.